Olivia Morgan had always been a good-natured baby. At 9 months old, she usually greeted visitors with an enthusiastic bounce in her walker and happy, babbling sounds that made her parents, Sarah and Michael, glow with pride. Ever since Sarah had returned to work as a pediatric nurse 3 months earlier, they'd established a comfortable routine. Michael worked from home as a software developer, caring for Olivia in between coding sessions, with Sarah taking over when she returned from her hospital shifts. It should have been a seamless arrangement, and it was, until the pattern emerged. The first time it happened was during a Sunday dinner in March. Michael's older brother, Craig, had just moved back to Philadelphia after 5 years in Seattle. As the brothers hadn't seen each other in person for over 2 years, this visit was long overdue. Sarah had prepared a roast chicken, and the dining room table was set with their wedding china. Everything was perfect, until Craig walked through the door. Olivia, who had been contentedly playing in her activity center, took one look at her uncle and erupted into tears. Not the usual fussiness of a tired baby, but gut-wrenching, red-faced wails that nothing could soothe. Sarah spent most of that first dinner in the nursery, trying to calm her daughter while the brothers caught up over cooling food. "I'm so sorry," Sarah apologized when she finally returned to the table and exhausted Olivia asleep against her shoulder. "She's never like this. Maybe she's coming down with something." Craig waved away her concern. "Don't worry about it. Kids that age can be unpredictable. I probably just have one of those faces." The evening ended early, with promises to try again soon. Sarah and Michael checked Olivia's temperature, examined her for any signs of discomfort, and found nothing. By the next morning, she was back to her sunny self, happily mashing bananas into her hair at breakfast. "Must have been an off night," Michael suggested, and Sarah agreed. They thought nothing more of it, until it happened again. 2 weeks later, Craig stopped by unexpectedly on a Saturday afternoon, bringing a stuffed elephant for his niece. Olivia was napping when he arrived, so the 3 adults chatted in the living room, keeping their voices low. When Sarah went to check on the baby monitor and saw that Olivia had woken up, she brought her downstairs to meet her uncle properly. The result was instantaneous and identical to the first visit. The moment Olivia's eyes landed on Craig, she began to scream. Her little face contorted in what appeared to be genuine fear, her body rigid in Sarah's arms. "Maybe she just needs to get used to me," Craig suggested, reaching for the baby. "Let me try." Sarah hesitated, her maternal instincts flaring, but reluctantly handed Olivia over. The screaming intensified to a pitch that Sarah had never heard before. Olivia's arms flailed, her face turned an alarming shade of red, and she arched her back so violently that Craig nearly dropped her. "Whoa!" he exclaimed, quickly passing the hysterical child back to her mother. "That's one strong set of lungs." Sarah took Olivia upstairs, leaving the brothers in an awkward silence that was eventually broken by Craig's forced laughter. "Guess I won't be winning any Uncle of the Year awards anytime soon." Michael tried to make light of the situation, but he was troubled. When Sarah returned 20 minutes later, Olivia had once again cried herself to sleep. "I don't understand," she whispered to Michael. "She's such a happy baby normally." That night, after Craig had left and Olivia was tucked into her crib, Michael and Sarah discussed the strange reaction. "Maybe it's his cologne," Michael suggested. "Or the tone of his voice." Sarah shook her head. "I don't think so. Did you see her face? She looked terrified." "She's not even a year old, Sarah. Babies that age don't really feel terror. They respond to stimuli, discomfort, hunger, not complex emotions." "I know what I saw," Sarah insisted, but she didn't press the point. Michael was right. It didn't make sense for an infant to have such an extreme reaction to someone she barely knew. Over the next 2 months, they tested various theories. Craig visited wearing different clothes, after showering with unscented soap, speaking in different tones, approaching Olivia slowly, staying across the room. Nothing worked. The pattern was always the same. Olivia would be perfectly content until she saw her uncle, and then she would dissolve into hysterical tears that only subsided when he left. What disturbed Sarah most was that Olivia was otherwise developing beautifully. She interacted normally with other visitors, smiled at strangers in the grocery store, and was hitting all her developmental milestones right on schedule. It was only Craig who triggered this extreme reaction. By June, their social gatherings had fallen into an uncomfortable routine. Craig would come over, Olivia would scream, and Sarah would take her upstairs until he left. It was putting a strain on the brothers' relationship, with Michael torn between supporting his wife's concerns and maintaining his connection with Craig. "I think we should stop inviting him for a while," Sarah said one night after a particularly difficult dinner. "Just until Olivia's a little older and can maybe verbalize what's bothering her." Michael frowned. "He's my brother, Sarah, and he just moved back to be closer to family. We can't just shut him out because of some inexplicable baby reaction." "I know, but—" Sarah hesitated, searching for words that wouldn't sound accusatory. "Don't you think it's strange that she only reacts this way to Craig? No one else, just him?" "Of course it's strange, but babies are strange. Remember how she used to scream whenever we turned on the blender? Then one day she just stopped. This will pass too." Sarah wasn't convinced, but she didn't want to create conflict. She agreed to keep trying, hoping that Michael was right and Olivia would eventually outgrow this puzzling behavior. In July, Sarah's mother came to visit for a week, bringing a belated birthday gift for Olivia. A plush teddy bear with a built-in white noise machine designed to help babies sleep. It was perfect timing, as Olivia had recently started waking up multiple times during the night, often seeming startled or frightened. "This helped your cousin Emma when she was going through her sleep regression," Sarah's mother explained, demonstrating how the bear worked. "It has different sounds: heartbeat, ocean waves, lullabies, and it can record your voice reading a bedtime story. Some models even have a voice activation feature that turns on automatically if the baby starts crying." Sarah was grateful for anything that might help restore their peaceful nights. She recorded herself singing Olivia's favorite lullaby, placed the bear in the crib, and hoped for the best. That night, Olivia slept for 6 uninterrupted hours, the longest stretch in weeks. The second night was even better. By the third night, Sarah began to feel like herself again, the fog of sleep deprivation finally lifting. "That bear is a miracle worker," she told Michael over morning coffee. "Mom really came through for us." Michael nodded, distracted by work emails on his phone. "That's great. Hey, Craig asked if he could come over for dinner tonight. I told him it should be fine." Sarah's good mood faltered. "Tonight? I don't know, Michael. We've finally got Olivia sleeping well. I don't want to upset her. He'll come after her bedtime," Michael promised. "She won't even know he's here." Against her better judgment, Sarah agreed. Craig arrived at 8:30 p.m., bringing a bottle of wine and takeout from their favorite Thai restaurant. The adults enjoyed a pleasant dinner, their conversation flowing naturally for the first time in months, without the tension of a crying baby in the background. After dinner, Michael went to the kitchen to make coffee while Sarah and Craig cleared the table. In the momentary quiet, the baby monitor on the counter crackled to life with the sound of Olivia stirring in her crib. "Sounds like she's waking up," Sarah said, setting down the plates she was carrying. "I should go check on her." "I can grab you both dessert while you're up there," Craig offered. "I picked up some of those chocolate things you like from the bakery on Pine Street." Sarah smiled, appreciating the gesture. "That would be great, thanks." She headed upstairs to the nursery where she found Olivia fussing but not fully awake. The teddy bear was playing its ocean wave sound, creating a soothing backdrop of white noise. Sarah adjusted the baby's blanket, stroked her cheek until her eyes closed again, and then tiptoed out of the room. Back downstairs, she found Michael and Craig in the living room with coffee and dessert plates. The three of them spent another hour chatting before Craig stood to leave. "This was nice," he said, giving Sarah a quick hug. "Almost like the old days." After he left, Sarah and Michael cleaned up the last of the dishes, both pleased with how the evening had gone. "See?" Michael said, wrapping his arms around her waist. "I told you it would be fine. Maybe she's already outgrowing whatever it was." "Maybe," Sarah conceded, though she still felt a lingering unease she couldn't quite explain. That night, she woke around 2 a.m. to Olivia's cries coming through the monitor. Slipping out of bed, she made her way to the nursery, where she found her daughter standing in her crib, clutching the bars and sobbing. "Shh, it's okay, baby girl," Sarah murmured, lifting her into her arms. "Mommy's here." It took nearly an hour to settle Olivia back to sleep. As Sarah laid her down in the crib, she noticed that the teddy bear had been pushed into the corner. She reached for it, intending to restart the white noise when she noticed a small light blinking on the bear's ear, the recording indicator. That was odd. She hadn't activated the recording function since setting up the lullaby the day her mother gave them the bear. Curious, she pressed the playback button, expecting to hear her own voice singing Olivia to sleep. Instead, what came through the small speaker froze her blood. A whispered voice, unmistakably Craig's, hissing words that no uncle should ever say to an infant niece. Threatening, twisted things, spoken in the darkest hours of the night while Sarah and Michael slept in their room down the hall. The timestamp on the recording was from that very night, 11:46 p.m., more than 2 hours after Craig had supposedly left their house. Sarah's hands shook as she pressed stop. For several minutes she stood motionless over the crib, her mind racing to process what she'd just heard. Then, moving with the careful precision of someone trying not to wake a sleeping child, she took the bear, closed the nursery door, and hurried to the bathroom at the end of the hall. There, with trembling fingers, she replayed the recording from the beginning, holding the bear close to her ear to catch every horrifying word. This time she heard something she'd missed before, the soft sound of the nursery door opening, footsteps approaching the crib, and then those vile whispers. As the full impact of what she was hearing hit her, Sarah sank to the floor, one hand pressed against her mouth to stifle her own cries. Now she understood the pattern. Olivia's inexplicable terror at the sight of her uncle, the sleep disruptions, the strange feeling Sarah herself had when Craig was around, that gut instinct she'd dismissed as irrational. Her daughter had been trying to tell her something all along. The question now was what to do about it. As Sarah sat on the cold bathroom tile, clutching the evidence of a betrayal too terrible to fully comprehend, she knew that nothing in their family would ever be the same again. The morning after discovering the recording, Sarah moved through her routine like a sleepwalker. She fed Olivia breakfast, changed her diaper, and set her up with toys in the living room, all while her mind replayed those chilling whispers. Michael had left early for a meeting at a client's office, unaware of the nightmare that had unfolded in his absence. Alone with her thoughts and her daughter, Sarah tried to formulate a plan. Her first instinct was to call the police, but what exactly would she report? A recording of threatening whispers? Would that be enough to warrant an investigation? And what would this do to Michael, to their family? She needed more evidence, something concrete that couldn't be explained away as a misunderstanding. With shaking hands, she picked up her phone and searched for hidden cameras small enough to conceal in a nursery. Same-day delivery was available. She placed the order without hesitation. While Olivia napped that afternoon, Sarah examined the teddy bear more carefully. It was an expensive model, motion-activated with a continuous recording feature that captured sounds when triggered. According to the instruction manual, it stored up to 12 hours of audio before overwriting older files. Sarah connected it to her laptop and downloaded everything, creating a backup of the disturbing evidence. The timestamp on Craig's whispers aligned with the time he had excused himself to use the restroom just before leaving the previous night. While Michael was getting Craig's coat from the closet, his brother had slipped upstairs to the nursery for those few terrible moments. The question that haunted Sarah was how many other times this had happened before they had the recording bear. How long had Craig been visiting Olivia's room? What else had he done that she didn't know about? Her phone chimed with a text from Michael. "Meeting running late. Won't be home until 7. Can you tell Craig I need to reschedule our lunch tomorrow?" Sarah stared at the message, her stomach churning. Michael and Craig had made plans to meet without her knowledge. The thought of her brother-in-law continuing his normal life while she sat with this horrible knowledge was unbearable. She typed back, "Okay, everything fine at home, take your time." The casual lies felt strange in such extraordinary circumstances, but she wasn't ready to tell Michael yet. Not until she had a plan. The package with the hidden cameras arrived at 4 p.m. Sarah installed them with grim efficiency. One disguised as a wall clock in the nursery, another as a picture frame on the dresser, both with perfect views of the crib. She downloaded the monitoring app to her phone, tested the connections, and satisfied herself that everything was working properly. That evening, when Michael returned home, Sarah maintained a facade of normalcy that took every ounce of her willpower. They ate dinner, bathed Olivia, and followed their usual bedtime routine. If Michael noticed Sarah's unusual quietness, he didn't comment on it. Did you tell Craig about tomorrow? He asked as they were getting ready for bed. Sarah nodded. I texted him. He said it was fine. Another lie. She hadn't contacted Craig at all. Great, I'll reschedule for next week. Maybe we can all go out somewhere, make it a family thing. The word family made Sarah's skin crawl. Maybe, she replied non-committally. We'll see. That night, Sarah barely slept. She kept her phone beside her pillow, the camera app open, her eyes burning with fatigue as she watched her daughter's peaceful slumber. Nothing disturbed Olivia's rest, for which Sarah was grateful, but the waiting was its own kind of torture. The next day, Sarah called in sick to work. She couldn't bear the thought of leaving Olivia, not even with Michael. She spent the morning researching child protective services, legal definitions of child endangerment, how to report suspicious behavior. The information was overwhelming, much of it contradictory, and none of it offering clear guidance for her specific situation. By afternoon, Sarah had made a decision. She would confront Craig directly, with evidence in hand and the threat of exposure hanging over him. She would demand he never come near Olivia again, never contact their family. If he refused, she would go to the police regardless of the consequences. She called Craig's cell phone, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. Sarah, what a pleasant surprise. His voice was casual, friendly, as if he hadn't whispered threats to an infant just 2 nights before. We need to talk, she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. Can you come over tonight, around 8? Michael's taking a work call then so we can speak privately. Sounds serious, Craig replied, a new note of caution in his tone. Everything okay? Just some things I want to discuss about Olivia. She'll be asleep so we won't be interrupted. After a brief hesitation, he agreed. Sure, I can do 8. See you then. Sarah spent the rest of the day preparing. She set up her laptop in the kitchen with the audio files ready to play. She made sure the nursery cameras were working. She considered calling a friend to be present as a witness, but decided against it. This needed to be handled within the family first. At 7:30, she put Olivia to bed, lingering longer than usual over the crib, touching her daughter's soft hair and making silent promises of protection. Then she went downstairs to wait. Michael's work call began at 7:45 in his home office. The door closed as he discussed technical details with overseas clients. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, hands folded tightly in her lap, watching the minutes tick by on the wall clock. At 8:03, the doorbell rang. Sarah took a deep breath, steeled herself, and opened the door. Craig stood on the porch, a bottle of wine in one hand and a questioning expression on his face. Hey there. Brought a little something to share while we talk. Sarah stepped back to let him in, not trusting herself to speak yet. She led him to the kitchen where her laptop waited, screen dark but ready. So, Craig said, setting the wine on the counter and turning to face her. What's on your mind? Michael mentioned Olivia's still having some issues when I'm around. You could say that, Sarah replied, her voice surprisingly steady. She seems to have a strong reaction to you, almost like she's afraid. Craig spread his hands in a gesture of innocence. Kids, right? Who knows what goes on in those little heads? Actually, Sarah said, moving to her laptop, I think I have a pretty good idea what's frightening her. She pressed play, and Craig's whispered voice filled the kitchen. The color drained from his face as he listened to his own words. Vile threats mixed with endearments, promises to return when everyone was asleep, references to our special time. Sarah watched him without blinking, cataloging every flicker of emotion that crossed his face. Shock, fear, calculation, and finally, a practiced kind of regret. Sarah, I can explain. Don't, she cut him off, her voice like ice. Don't you dare try to explain this away. I have multiple recordings, Craig. Every time you've been in this house for the past month, every time you've sneaked into my daughter's room. It's all documented. He took a step toward her, his expression shifting to something harder. Look, I think you're misinterpreting something here. I was just... If you come any closer to me, I will scream, and Michael will hear me. And then I'll play him these recordings, and he'll know exactly what his brother has been doing. Craig stopped, his hands falling to his sides. What do you want? I want you out of our lives. Completely. No contact with Olivia. No visits. No phone calls. You'll tell Michael you've been transferred back to Seattle or something. I don't care what excuse you use, but you're going to disappear. A flicker of calculation returned to Craig's eyes. And if I don't? You'll what? Destroy your husband's relationship with his only brother? Break up the family over some misunderstood whispers to a baby who won't even remember any of this? Sarah's hand moved to her pocket, where her phone was recording this entire conversation. If you don't leave, I go to the police. I have enough evidence for them to at least investigate, and once they start looking into your history, who knows what they'll find? Are you willing to take that risk? For a long, tense moment, they stared at each other across the kitchen. Sarah could hear Michael's voice faintly from his office, oblivious to the confrontation unfolding just rooms away. Finally, Craig's posture relaxed, his expression settling into something that chilled Sarah more than his anger had. A small, knowing smile. You know, Sarah, I've always thought you were smarter than most. That's why Michael married you, I guess. He reached for the wine bottle he'd brought, examining the label casually. I'll play along for now. Tell Michael whatever story you want. But this conversation isn't over. He set the bottle down and walked toward the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. Family is forever, Sarah. Remember that. After he left, Sarah sank into a chair, her legs suddenly too weak to support her. The confrontation had gone both better and worse than she'd expected. Craig had agreed to leave, but his parting words carried an unmistakable threat. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. She needed to tell Michael the truth. Tonight. No matter how painful it would be, her husband deserved to know what was happening under his own roof. Sarah was so lost in thought that she didn't hear Michael's office door open or his footsteps approaching until he spoke from the kitchen doorway. Was that Craig leaving? I thought I heard the front door. Sarah looked up, meeting her husband's questioning gaze, and realized the moment of truth had arrived sooner than she'd planned. Michael, we need to talk, she said, closing her laptop. It's about Craig and Olivia. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence that followed Sarah's revelation. Michael sat across from her at the table, his face a mask of disbelief as she played the recordings for him. First from the teddy bear, then from her confrontation with Craig just minutes earlier. This has to be some kind of misunderstanding, he said finally, his voice hoarse. Craig wouldn't. He couldn't. I know this is hard to hear, Sarah said gently, reaching for his hand across the table. I didn't want to believe it either. Michael pulled his hand away, standing abruptly. No, there's an explanation. Maybe he was just trying to scare her a little, like when we used to play monster under the bed as kids. It doesn't mean anything sinister. Sarah stared at him, stunned by his reaction. Michael, listen to the recording again. Those aren't playful monster words. He called her his special girl. He told her they have secret time together. He said he watches her sleep. What innocent explanation could there possibly be for that? I don't know. Michael's voice rose in frustration. But there has to be one. Craig is my brother. I've known him my entire life. He would never hurt a child. He would never hurt Olivia. Then why does she scream every time she sees him? Why does she wake up terrified in the middle of the night? Babies can sense things, Michael. She's been trying to tell us something all along. Michael paced the kitchen, running his hands through his hair. This is crazy. You're suggesting my brother is some kind of predator. Based on what? Some whispers that could mean anything. Maybe he was just being affectionate in his own weird way. Sarah's patience snapped. Affectionate? Did you hear the same recording I did? He told our 9-month-old daughter that she belongs to him, that she'll always be his special girl. What kind of uncle says that? I don't know, Sarah, but jumping to the worst possible conclusion isn't helping anyone. Then what do you suggest? That we ignore this, pretend everything's fine and keep letting him into our home, into Olivia's room? Michael stopped pacing, his expression conflicted. No, of course not. We'll talk to him together. Get his side of the story. There's got to be an explanation. I already got his side, Sarah said, gesturing to her phone where the recording still played. He didn't deny it, Michael. He threatened me, said family is forever, like some kind of warning. He was probably just shocked by the accusation. Anyone would be defensive if they were blindsided like that. Sarah stood up, frustration and fear making her voice shake. Why are you defending him? Why aren't you putting your daughter first? I am putting Olivia first, Michael shouted, then immediately lowered his voice, glancing toward the ceiling where their daughter slept. But I'm not going to destroy my relationship with my brother, based on a recording that could be interpreted a dozen different ways. How many ways can you interpret our special time? Tell me, Michael, what innocent meaning could those words possibly have? Michael had no answer for that. He sank back into his chair, the fight draining out of him. I just can't believe it. Not Craig. Sarah softened, understanding the shock and grief her husband was experiencing. She knelt beside his chair, taking his hands in hers. I know this is painful, but we have to face facts. Whatever Craig's intentions are, his behavior is deeply inappropriate. We can't allow him access to Olivia anymore. Michael nodded slowly, his eyes downcast. What did he say when you confronted him? Is he going to leave like you asked? He said he would, but I don't trust him, the way he looked at me. Sarah shuddered at the memory. I think we should consider moving. Start fresh somewhere he can't find us. Move? Sarah, that's extreme. Our whole lives are here. Your job, our friends. We just bought this house last year. None of that matters if Olivia isn't safe. Michael pulled his hands away and stood up again, his expression hardening. I need to speak to Craig myself. Hear what he has to say face to face. Alarm flashed through Sarah. That's not a good idea. He already knows I've told you by now. He'll have his story ready. He's my brother, Michael said firmly. I deserve to hear his side directly. And what about what I deserve? Sarah asked, her voice rising despite her efforts to stay calm. I found these recordings. I confronted him. I'm telling you what happened. Why isn't that enough? Because this isn't some stranger we're talking about. This is family. We've known Craig our whole lives, which makes what he's doing even worse. He's using that family connection to get access to our daughter. Their argument was interrupted by a cry from the baby monitor. Olivia had awakened, perhaps disturbed by the raised voices downstairs. Sarah moved toward the stairs, but Michael stopped her. I'll get her, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. I need a few minutes to think anyway. As he disappeared upstairs, Sarah sat heavily at the kitchen table, the recordings still open on her laptop. She had anticipated resistance from Michael. Denial was a natural first response to such a shocking revelation, but she hadn't expected him to so thoroughly question her judgment. Upstairs, she could hear Michael's voice through the monitor, soft and soothing as he settled Olivia. It's okay, princess, Daddy's here. Everything's going to be fine. Sarah wished she could believe that, but the truth was, nothing about this situation was fine, and pretending otherwise wouldn't make it so. When Michael returned downstairs 20 minutes later, his expression was calmer but no less troubled. She's asleep again, he reported, taking a seat across from Sarah. I checked the bear and the cameras. Everything's in place. Thank you, Sarah said, grateful for this small acknowledgement of her concerns. I've been thinking, Michael continued, his voice carefully measured. We need to handle this cautiously. If what you're suggesting is true, then yes, we need to protect Olivia. But if there's some misunderstanding, we could permanently damage relationships for no reason. Sarah bit back a sharp retort. What are you proposing? First, Craig doesn't come to the house anymore, at least for now. I'll meet him somewhere public tomorrow to talk. Second, we don't make any drastic decisions like moving until we have more information. And third, he hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with his next suggestion, we consider involving a professional, someone who can help us determine if Olivia has actually experienced any harm. The implication made Sarah's stomach turn, but she nodded. I agree with that. In fact, I've already researched child psychologists who specialize in infant trauma. There's one at my hospital I can speak to confidentially. Good, Michael said, sounding relieved that they had found some common ground. We'll take it one step at a time, together. But as they prepared for bed that night, the distance between them was palpable. Michael slept on the far edge of the mattress, his back to Sarah, while she lay awake watching the nursery cameras on her phone, jumping at every shadow and sound. The next morning brought new tension. Michael announced he had arranged to meet Craig for lunch at a restaurant downtown. I won't tell him about the recordings yet, he promised when Sarah expressed concern. I just want to feel him out, see how he reacts when I mention Olivia's behavior around him. Sarah wanted to object but held her tongue. This was Michael's process. He needed to come to terms with the truth in his own way. All she could do was protect Olivia while he worked through his doubts. "Be careful," she said instead. "Whatever you do, don't invite him back to the house." Michael left at noon, his expression grim with purpose. Sarah spent the afternoon with Olivia, playing peekaboo and trying to maintain a cheerful facade, despite her churning anxiety. She checked her phone constantly, waiting for updates from Michael, but none came. It was nearly 5 o'clock when she heard his key in the front door. She met him in the hallway, Olivia on her hip, searching his face for clues about the meeting. Michael looked exhausted, the kind of bone-deep weariness that comes from emotional rather than physical exertion. "I need a shower," he said, brushing past her without meeting her eyes. "Michael, wait, what happened? What did he say?" He paused at the foot of the stairs, finally turning to face her. "He denied everything, of course. Said you've always been jealous of our relationship, that you've been trying to drive a wedge between us since the wedding." Sarah's jaw dropped. "That's absurd. I've always encouraged you to spend time with your family." "I know," Michael said, his voice flat. "He also said you misinterpreted the recordings, that he was just telling Olivia stories, trying to be a good uncle. He said babies can sense tension, which is why she cries around him, because you're tense when he visits." "And you believe him?" Michael ran a hand over his face. "I don't know what to believe anymore. He sounded so convincing, Sarah. So hurt by the accusations." "Of course he did. That's what manipulators do. They turn everything around, make themselves the victim." "Maybe," Michael conceded. "But there's something else. He wants to take a polygraph test to prove his innocence. Says he has nothing to hide." Sarah scoffed. "Polygraphs aren't reliable. That's why they're not admissible in court. Besides, skilled liars can beat them easily." "So now he's not just inappropriate but a skilled liar too?" Michael's voice took on an edge. "You seem to have him all figured out." "I'm just following the evidence, Michael. The recordings, Olivia's reaction, his threats when I confronted him. What more do you need?" Michael didn't answer directly. Instead, he said, "He's staying at a hotel tonight. Says he doesn't feel welcome at his apartment knowing you have a key." The implication was clear. Craig had suggested Sarah might plant evidence or somehow frame him further. The absurdity of it made her laugh bitterly. "Right. Because I have nothing better to do than orchestrate an elaborate plot against your brother. Perfect sense. Sarah, I'm just telling you what he said. I'm not saying I believe him. But you don't entirely believe me either, do you?" The silence that followed was answer enough. Michael turned and continued up the stairs, the conversation effectively over. That night, as Sarah rocked Olivia to sleep, she made a decision. If Michael couldn't commit to protecting their daughter unconditionally, she would have to take matters into her own hands. First thing tomorrow, she would contact the child psychologist at her hospital. Then she would call a lawyer to understand her options. Because one thing was becoming increasingly clear. This wasn't just about Craig anymore. It was about whether her marriage could survive the truth, whatever that turned out to be. The waiting room of Dr. Eleanor Chen's office was designed to put children at ease. Soft colors, plush toys, a small aquarium bubbling peacefully in the corner. But nothing could ease the tension Sarah felt as she sat with Olivia on her lap, waiting for their appointment. She had called in sick to work again, telling Michael she was taking Olivia for her regular checkup. It wasn't entirely a lie. This was a kind of checkup, just not the routine kind he assumed. Dr. Chen was one of the most respected child psychologists in the hospital system, specializing in infant and toddler trauma. She had agreed to see them on short notice as a professional courtesy to Sarah. "Nurse Morgan," Dr. Chen greeted her, shaking her hand before bending to smile at Olivia. "And this must be the little one I've heard so much about." "Hello there, sweet girl." Olivia studied the doctor with solemn eyes before offering a tentative smile, which Dr. Chen returned warmly. "Please have a seat," she said, gesturing to a comfortable arrangement of chairs. Unlike traditional therapy offices, hers contained a play area with developmentally appropriate toys scattered on a colorful mat. "Why don't we let Olivia explore while we talk?" Sarah set her daughter down among the toys, keeping one eye on her as she explained the situation to Dr. Chen. The pattern of Olivia's distress around Craig, the disturbing recordings. Michael's reluctance to accept the implications, and her own growing fear for her daughter's safety. Dr. Chen listened without interruption, taking occasional notes. Her expression remained professionally neutral, but Sarah caught flickers of concern in her eyes. "What you're describing is certainly troubling," she said when Sarah finished, "particularly the recordings. Have you considered taking this to the authorities?" "I've thought about it," Sarah admitted, "but without physical evidence of abuse, I'm afraid they won't take it seriously. And if they dismiss it, Michael might see that as vindication of his brother. I understand your concern. These situations are rarely straightforward." Dr. Chen watched Olivia, who was contentedly stacking wooden blocks. "From what you've described, Olivia's reaction to her uncle is consistent with a stress response. Babies her age can't articulate their feelings, but they absolutely can form negative associations with specific individuals who make them feel uncomfortable or unsafe. So you believe me?" Sarah hadn't realized how desperately she needed that validation until the words left her mouth. "It's not about belief, Sarah. It's about evaluating the evidence, which in this case suggests something inappropriate is occurring. The question now is what to do about it. That's where I'm stuck. Michael wants proof, but I don't know what would convince him short of catching Craig in the act, which I would never allow to happen." Dr. Chen nodded thoughtfully. "This puts you in an impossible position. You need to protect your daughter while also navigating a complex family dynamic." She paused, considering her next words carefully. "I think a formal evaluation would be appropriate here, not just for Olivia's sake, but also to provide documentation should you need it later." "What would that involve?" "A series of specialized assessments designed for pre-verbal children. We look for behavioral indicators, attachment patterns, stress responses. It's not definitive, nothing is at this age, but it can help establish whether there's cause for further concern." Sarah watched her daughter playing, blissfully unaware of the adult conversation happening around her. Will it be traumatic for her? I don't want to put her through more stress. The evaluation is designed to be as gentle as possible. Most children experience it as simply playing with a new adult. Dr. Chen's expression softened. "But I want to be clear about something, Sarah. If I find indicators consistent with abuse, I am legally mandated to report it to Child Protective Services." "I understand," Sarah said, though the thought sent a chill through her. Once authorities became involved, the situation would escalate quickly, for better or worse. "One more thing," Dr. Chen added. "Have you considered your own safety in all this? If your brother-in-law is capable of threatening a child, he may pose a risk to you as well, especially now that you've confronted him." The question caught Sarah off guard. She'd been so focused on protecting Olivia that she hadn't fully processed Craig's parting words to her. "Family is forever, Sarah. Remember that." "I have the recordings," she said, more to reassure herself than Dr. Chen. "If he tries anything, I have evidence. Evidence is useful after the fact. Prevention is better." Dr. Chen opened her desk drawer and removed a business card. "This is a contact at a local women's resource center. They can help you develop a safety plan, just as a precaution." Sarah took the card, slipping it into her purse. "Thank you. When can we schedule the evaluation?" "I have an opening tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Can you bring her then?" "I'll have to tell Michael something. He's already suspicious about today's visit." "That's entirely up to you. But in my experience, transparency with the non-offending parent is usually best, even when they're resistant to hearing the truth. He may surprise you." Sarah wished she could share Dr. Chen's optimism, but her conversation with Michael the previous night had left her doubtful. Still, she nodded. "I'll try to talk to him tonight." As they prepared to leave, Dr. Chen crouched to Olivia's level. "Goodbye for now, little one. I'll see you tomorrow." Olivia babbled happily in response, reaching for the doctor's colorful necklace. The easy trust she showed toward this stranger only highlighted how unusual her reaction to Craig truly was. On the drive home, Sarah rehearsed different approaches for telling Michael about the evaluation. Direct honesty seemed best, but she needed to frame it in a way that wouldn't trigger his defensiveness. He needed to see this as a process of finding the truth, not an attempt to vilify his brother. When they arrived home, Sarah was surprised to find Michael's car in the driveway. He wasn't supposed to be back from work for hours. As she carried Olivia inside, An unsettling quiet greeted her. "Michael," she called, setting Olivia's carrier on the floor. "We're home." She found him in the living room, sitting rigidly on the sofa, staring at something in his hands. As she moved closer, she saw it was the teddy bear, Olivia's recording bear. "How was the doctor's appointment?" he asked without looking up, his voice unnaturally calm. "Fine, just a routine checkup." The lie felt heavy on her tongue, especially given what she needed to tell him. Michael finally raised his eyes to meet hers. "That's interesting because I called Dr. Patel's office to see if you needed me to bring anything, and they said Olivia doesn't have an appointment scheduled until next month." Sarah's mouth went dry. "I can explain." "I'm sure you can," Michael cut her off. "Just like I'm sure you can explain why I found this bear hidden in your underwear drawer instead of in Olivia's crib where it belongs. I was worried Craig might find it and delete the recordings," Sarah admitted. "I needed to keep the evidence safe." "The evidence," Michael repeated flatly. "Right, the evidence that my brother is some kind of monster." He held up the bear. "Did you know this model has a timestamp function that shows exactly when each recording was made?" A cold dread settled in Sarah's stomach. "Yes, that's how I knew when Craig was in the nursery. Except when I reviewed the files, I found something strange. There are gaps in the recordings, sections that have been deleted." "Why would that be, Sarah? I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't deleted anything." Michael set the bear down and picked up his laptop. "I transferred all the audio files, including the deleted ones that I was able to recover. Want to know what I found?" Before Sarah could respond, he pressed play. Craig's voice filled the room, just as chilling as before, whispering those inappropriate endearments to Olivia. But then the recording continued beyond what Sarah had heard, with Craig saying, "Your daddy asked me to check on you, princess. He's worried about how your mommy's been acting lately. But don't you worry, Uncle Craig won't let anything happen to you." Sarah stared at the laptop in confusion. "That wasn't on the recording I heard. He must have gone back later and added that. Or you deleted it because it didn't fit your narrative," Michael suggested, his voice hardening. "Just like you deleted the parts where he says he's reading her a bedtime story. The same story his father used to read to us. The same story that, yes, includes some old-fashioned lines about a child being special and having secret adventures. Michael, you can't seriously believe that's all this is. A bedtime story. Why would he be reading to her in whispers in the middle of the night without our knowledge? Because you've made it clear you don't want him around her. He's trying to form a relationship with his niece despite your obvious hostility." Sarah took a step back, stunned by the accusation. "My hostility? Our daughter screams in terror every time she sees him. That started long before I found the recordings. Babies pick up on tension, Sarah. You've never liked Craig, admit it. You've always thought he was too close to me, too involved in our lives." "That's not true," Sarah protested, though she had occasionally felt that Michael deferred too much to his brother's opinions. "This isn't about my feelings toward Craig. It's about protecting our daughter." Michael stood up, his expression a mixture of anger and disappointment. "Protecting her from what exactly? A loving uncle? Or are you using Olivia as a weapon in whatever game you're playing? Game? You think I'm making this up for fun? Creating elaborate recordings, faking our daughter's distress? For what purpose? I don't know. That's what scares me, Sarah. I don't understand why you're doing this." He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "Craig thinks you need help. Professional help." The implication hit Sarah like a physical blow. "So I'm the unstable one now? That's quite a turnaround from the conversation we had yesterday. I'm just trying to make sense of all this. The recordings, the lies about where you were taking Olivia today, the selective editing of evidence." "I didn't edit anything." Sarah's voice rose in frustration. "Check the original files on the bear. They'll show exactly what I heard." "I did check. That's how I found the deleted sections." Michael's tone softened slightly. "Look, I know you believe what you're saying. Maybe you genuinely misinterpreted what you heard. Maybe postpartum anxiety is affecting your perceptions." "Don't you dare," Sarah hissed, fury rising within her. "Don't you dare suggest this is hormonal. I know what I heard, Michael. I know what our daughter has been telling us with her reactions. If you can't see that, if you'd rather believe your brother's lies than your wife's truth, then we have a much bigger problem than I realized." The sudden sound of Olivia fussing from her carrier broke the tension. Sarah moved to pick her up, cradling her protectively. "I've scheduled an evaluation with a child psychologist for tomorrow morning," she said, her decision made. "Dr. Eleanor Chen at the hospital. She specializes in infant trauma. I'm taking Olivia whether you support it or not." Michael's face paled. "A trauma specialist? Sarah, that's extreme. There's no evidence Olivia has been traumatized. Her crying every time she sees Craig isn't evidence? Her night terrors aren't evidence? The recordings aren't evidence? What will it take, Michael? How far does this have to go before you put your daughter first?" "I am putting her first. I'm trying to protect her from unnecessary psychological probing based on your suspicions." Sarah took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "Then come with us tomorrow. See for yourself what Dr. Chen has to say. If she finds no cause for concern, I'll drop the whole thing." Michael hesitated, conflict clear on his face. "And if she does find something? Then we deal with it together, as parents who want what's best for their child, regardless of how painful the truth might be." The silence that stretched between them was broken only by Olivia's soft babbling as she played with Sarah's necklace, blissfully unaware of the battle being waged over her safety. "Fine," Michael finally said. "I'll go. But I want to be clear. I still think this is an overreaction, and I still believe there's an explanation for Craig's behavior that doesn't involve what you're suggesting." Sarah nodded, relief mingling with lingering anxiety. At least he had agreed to the evaluation. It was a start. That night, after Olivia was asleep in her crib, the recording bear now positioned prominently on the dresser where they both could see it on the monitor, Sarah and Michael prepared for bed in tense silence. They moved around each other carefully, like dancers following unfamiliar choreography, afraid to misstep. As Sarah slipped under the covers, her phone pinged with a text message. She glanced at the screen and felt her blood freeze. Unknown. Number. "Is Olivia sleeping well tonight? Such a special girl deserves sweet dreams." She showed the message to Michael, whose face went through a rapid series of emotions: disbelief, confusion, and finally, the first flicker of genuine doubt about his brother's innocence. "It could be anyone," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "An automated spam text." "With our daughter's name," Sarah challenged. "Check your phone. Did you get the same message?" Michael's phone showed no new notifications. The text had been sent only to Sarah, a targeted message meant to unsettle her. "I'm calling the police," she decided, already dialing. "And tell them what? That you got a text asking if your baby is sleeping well? They'll laugh you out of the station." "It's clearly threatening when viewed in context with everything else that's happening." "We don't know it's from Craig," Michael insisted, though he sounded less certain now. Sarah completed the call anyway, explaining the situation to the dispatcher. As she expected, they were sympathetic, but unable to take action based on a single ambiguous text. They advised her to save the message and document any further contact, offering to send an officer to drive by the house periodically through the night. After hanging up, Sarah activated all the house alarms and checked that the nursery cameras were working. Only then did she return to bed, though she knew sleep would be elusive. "I'll call Craig in the morning," Michael offered as they lay in darkness. "Ask him directly about the text." "Thank you," Sarah said quietly, recognizing this small concession for what it was, the first crack in Michael's unwavering defense of his brother. As she drifted into uneasy sleep, another text arrived. She fumbled for her phone, squinting at the bright screen. "Unknown number. Family is forever, Sarah." Even when they're sleeping. This time, she didn't bother showing Michael or calling the police. Instead, she slipped out of bed and went to Olivia's room, settling into the rocking chair beside the crib. If Craig or anyone else wanted to get to her daughter, they would have to go through her first. She didn't return to her bedroom that night. And in the morning, when Michael found her still keeping vigil, the unspoken question in his eyes suggested that for the first time, he was beginning to truly consider the possibility that his brother might not be the man he thought he knew. The atmosphere in Dr. Chen's waiting room was even more tense the second day. Michael sat rigidly beside Sarah, his expression guarded as he filled out paperwork detailing Olivia's developmental history. He had barely spoken during the drive over, his silence punctuated only by a terse report that Craig hadn't answered his calls that morning. Sarah had her own worries. The threatening texts remained on her phone, saved and screenshot, but she hadn't received any further messages since the middle of the night. The silence felt more ominous than continued contact would have been. Mr. and Mrs. Morgan. Dr. A. Jen appeared in the doorway, her professional smile unchanging as she took in the obvious tension between them. "Please, come in." She led them to the same comfortable office where Sarah had spoken with her the day before. This time, a younger woman was present, introduced as Dr. Patil, a specialist in infant behavioral assessment. "I've explained the general situation to Dr. Patil," Dr. Chen said as they settled into chairs. "Today's evaluation will involve observation of Olivia's responses to various stimuli, images, sounds, interactions. We'll be looking for any stress responses or unusual reactions that might indicate distress associated with specific situations." "Is this really necessary?" Michael asked, his defensiveness barely concealed. "Olivia is a healthy, happy baby. She's meeting all her developmental milestones." "That's excellent to hear," Dr. Chen replied evenly. "This evaluation isn't about her general development. It's specifically designed to assess any potential distress responses that might not be apparent in everyday interactions." "Because my wife thinks my brother is doing something inappropriate," Michael stated bluntly. "Because your daughter shows clear distress in your brother's presence," Sarah corrected, trying to keep her voice calm. "And because there are recordings of him in her room at night, saying things no uncle should say to a baby." Dr. Chen held up a hand to pause their brewing argument. "Mr. Morgan, I understand your skepticism. Many parents in your position feel the same way. But I want to assure you that this evaluation isn't about confirming anyone's suspicions. It's about gathering objective information about Olivia's emotional responses." Michael didn't look convinced, but he nodded reluctantly. "Fine. What do you need us to do?" "For the first part, we'd like to observe Olivia at play, while we ask you both some questions. Then Dr. Patil will conduct the formal assessment while you watch from an observation room. The entire process takes about 2 hours. The initial interview proceeded smoothly. Olivia happily explored the toys while the doctors asked detailed questions about her routines, her reactions to various family members, her sleep patterns, and any behavioral changes they'd noticed. Michael gradually relaxed as the questions remained neutral and professional, with no apparent agenda. When they moved to the observation room for the assessment, however, his tension returned. Through a one-way window, they watched as Dr. Patil engaged Olivia in what appeared to be simple play. She showed the baby pictures of various people, some familiar faces from popular children's shows, others of strangers with different expressions. "She's establishing a baseline for Olivia's reactions to unfamiliar faces," Dr. Chen explained as they watched. "Most infants show mild curiosity or indifference to images of unknown adults." Next, Dr. Patil brought out a series of photographs showing men of various ages and appearances. She showed them to Olivia one by one, watching her reactions carefully. "Now she's looking for specific stress responses to certain types of faces," Dr. Chen continued. "For example, does Olivia show more distress when looking at men with particular features or expressions?" Olivia remained calm through most of the images, occasionally babbling or reaching for the pictures. Then Dr. Patil showed her a photograph of a man who bore a striking resemblance to Craig. Similar build, similar hair color, though not Craig himself. The change in Olivia was immediate and dramatic. She recoiled from the image, her face crumpling as she began to cry. Not the ordinary fussing of a tired baby, but the same distressed wailing they'd heard whenever Craig visited. Sarah felt Michael stiffen beside her. "That could be coincidence," he said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. "One picture doesn't prove anything." Dr. Chen made no comment, and they continued to watch as Dr. Patil soothed Olivia before continuing with the assessment. The next phase involved playing recorded voices while observing Olivia's reactions. Various male voices read the same nursery rhyme, some in normal tones, others in whispers, others in animated baby talk. Again, Olivia showed no unusual reaction until a voice with the same timbre and cadence as Craig's began to speak. Her distress returned instantly, rigid body, frightened cries, attempting to crawl away from the sound. "She's been coached," Michael insisted, though with less conviction. Sarah must have played Craig's voice around her while acting scared. "That's not how infant conditioning works, Mr. Morgan," Dr. Chen said gently. "It would take repeated, consistent pairing over a long period to create such a strong response. And even then, infants typically don't generalize their reactions to similar-looking strangers or similar-sounding voices unless the association is very powerful." The assessment continued with several more components, each revealing the same pattern. Olivia showed specific, consistent distress responses to anything resembling Craig. His appearance, his voice, even his distinctive cologne when presented among other scents. By the time they rejoined Dr. Patil in the main office, Michael was visibly shaken. His earlier certainty had eroded, replaced by the confusion of someone whose worldview was being forcibly realigned. "Based on our observations, Dr. Chen began, her tone carefully neutral. Olivia displays strong adverse reactions consistent with a stress response specifically triggered by stimuli resembling your brother. These reactions are not typical of normal stranger anxiety or general fearfulness. They suggest a conditioned negative association." "Meaning what, exactly?" Michael asked, his voice hoarse. "Meaning that Olivia has learned to associate certain characteristics, visual, auditory, and olfactory cues similar to Craig's, with experiences that caused her significant distress." Sarah reached for Michael's hand, expecting him to pull away. To her surprise, he gripped her fingers tightly, as if seeking an anchor in increasingly turbulent waters. "Could this be explained by something innocent?" he asked, a last attempt at finding an alternative explanation. "Maybe he spoke too loudly or played too roughly with her one time." Dr. Chen considered the question carefully. The intensity and consistency of her responses suggest something more significant than a single startling experience. "However, I can't tell you specifically what caused these reactions. I can only confirm that they exist and appear to be genuinely distressing to Olivia." "So what happens now?" Sarah asked. "That depends on what you decide to do with this information." Dr. Chen replied. "My recommendation would be continued monitoring and complete separation from the trigger stimulus, meaning no contact between Olivia and your brother for the foreseeable future." "And the recordings?" Michael asked. "The ones from the teddy bear? I'd certainly want to hear those as part of a comprehensive assessment. Would you be willing to share them?" Sarah looked to Michael, who nodded almost imperceptibly. She retrieved her phone and played the original, unedited recordings, both the ones she'd first discovered and the threatening texts she'd received overnight. Dr. Chen and Dr. Patil listened intently, their professional composure never slipping despite the disturbing content. When the recordings finished, Dr. Chen's expression was grave. "Given what I've heard and what we've observed today, I am professionally obligated to file a report with Child Protective Services," she said. "The combination of Olivia's clear distress responses, the content of these recordings, and the threatening messages creates a situation that requires further investigation by the appropriate authorities." "What will that mean for us?" Michael asked, his voice tight with anxiety. "For Olivia, CPS will conduct their own investigation, which typically includes a home visit and interviews with family members. Their primary concern will be ensuring Olivia's safety." "They won't take her away, will they?" Sarah's greatest fear surfaced in a trembling voice. "There's no reason they would remove her from your care based on what we've seen today," Dr. Chen assured her. "Both of you are clearly concerned for her welfare and taking appropriate steps to protect her. However, they will likely issue a temporary order restricting contact between Olivia and your brother pending their investigation." The ride home was silent but less tense than the drive to the hospital had been. Michael stared straight ahead as he drove, occasionally glancing in the rearview mirror at Olivia secure in her car seat. "I don't know what to think anymore," he finally said as they pulled into their driveway. "I've known Craig my whole life. The idea that he could. I know," Sarah said softly. "I didn't want to believe it either. But the way she reacted to those pictures, to that voice, and the texts you got last night," he gripped the steering wheel tightly. "Even if there's just a 1% chance something inappropriate is happening, how can I take that risk with our daughter?" "We can't," Sarah agreed, "no matter how painful the truth might be." They sat in the car for another moment, the engine off, a family suspended between what they had believed and what they were now forced to consider. I need to call the police about those texts, Michael decided. And we need to figure out how to secure the house better. If he's been getting in at night to access Olivia's room, we need to make sure that can't happen again. The firm resolve in his voice brought tears of relief to Sarah's eyes. Whether or not he fully believed Craig was capable of what the evidence suggested, Michael had made his choice. He was putting Olivia's safety first. Inside the house, while Michael called the police, Sarah took Olivia upstairs to change her diaper. As she laid her daughter on the changing table, something caught her eye. The nursery window was closed but unlatched, the security sensor slightly askew as if it had been tampered with. Cold fear washed over her. Someone had been in the nursery, recently enough that the window hadn't been checked since their hasty departure that morning. Had Craig been in their home while they were at the hospital? The thought made her nauseous. She quickly finished changing Olivia and carried her downstairs, where Michael was still on the phone with the police. She caught his attention, gesturing urgently toward the ceiling and mouthing the word, window. Understanding dawned on his face immediately, and he relayed the information to the dispatcher, his voice tight with renewed alarm. The police arrived within minutes, 2 patrol cars and an evidence technician. They examined the nursery window, confirming that the lock had been jimmied, and the security sensor carefully manipulated to prevent it from triggering the alarm. Fingerprints were lifted from the windowsill and screen, though results would take time to process. Has anyone unusual been in the house recently? The lead officer, Detective Rivera, asked as they gathered in the living room. Anyone who might have a personal issue with your family? Sarah and Michael exchanged glances. My brother, Craig Morgan, Michael said after a brief hesitation. There are concerns about his behavior around our daughter. He explained the situation in halting terms. The baby's distress, the recordings, the threatening texts, and now the tampered window. With each detail, the detective's expression grew more serious. We'd like to speak with your brother, she said when Michael finished. Do you know where he is currently? He's staying at the Westbrook Hotel downtown. At least that's what he told me yesterday. But he hasn't answered his phone all morning. Detective Rivera stepped aside to radio instructions to other officers, then returned to address them both. We're sending officers to check his hotel room and known locations. In the meantime, I strongly recommend you stay with friends or family until we can determine whether there's an ongoing threat to your safety. We don't want to leave our home, Sarah protested. Can't you post an officer here instead? We can arrange a patrol car to drive by regularly, but we don't have the resources for round-the-clock protection without clear evidence of imminent danger. Michael made a decision. We'll go to my parents' house in Lancaster. It's about 2 hours from here, and Craig doesn't have a key. We can leave right away. The detective nodded approvingly. I think that's wise. Pack enough for at least a few days. We'll secure the house after you leave and maintain increased patrols in the neighborhood. As they packed essentials for Olivia and themselves, Sarah's phone rang with an unfamiliar number. She almost didn't answer, fearing more threats, but Detective Rivera had instructed them to report any unusual communications immediately. Sarah Morgan speaking, she said cautiously. Mrs. Morgan, this is security at Westbrook Hotel. We have your brother-in-law, Craig Morgan, in custody. He attempted to access your credit card information at our front desk, claiming to be your husband. The manager recognized him from a police bulletin that just came through. Officers are on their way, but he's asking to speak with you or your husband. Sarah's hand trembled as she handed the phone to Michael. It's the hotel. They have Craig in custody. Michael took the call, his face draining of color as he listened. When he hung up, he looked shell-shocked. The police found a storage unit key in Craig's hotel room, he said numbly. They're getting a warrant to search it now. Sarah felt sick with dread. Why would they need a warrant for a storage unit? Because they found photographs in his room, photographs of Olivia sleeping, dozens of them, taken through her window over what looks like months. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into terrible place. Craig hadn't just been sneaking into the nursery during visits. He'd been stalking their daughter, watching her, photographing her, for far longer than they'd realized. 3 days later, they sat in Detective Rivera's office, listening as she outlined what the investigation had uncovered. The storage unit contained more photographs, not just of Olivia, but of other infants and young children, some dating back years. There were journal entries describing fantasies too disturbing to repeat, and recordings similar to the ones found on the teddy bear. We've identified 3 other potential victims so far, Detective Rivera explained. All children of friends or colleagues, all under the age of 2. We're working with their families now to determine if any physical abuse occurred. Michael sat with his head in his hands, occasionally shaking it in disbelief. Sarah kept her eyes fixed on the detective, forcing herself to hear every terrible detail. Their parents had taken Olivia for a walk, sparing her from this grim conversation. "What happens to Craig now?" Sarah finally asked. "He's being held without bail on multiple charges: breaking and entering, stalking, harassment, and possession of exploitative imagery. As the investigation continues, more charges may be added." "Will Olivia have to testify?" The thought of her baby daughter in a courtroom filled Sarah with fresh horror. Given her age, that's extremely unlikely. The physical evidence is substantial enough that prosecutors don't believe victim testimony will be necessary for most of the charges. Michael looked up, his eyes red-rimmed from sleepless nights and intermittent tears. "Could we have known? Were there signs we missed?" Detective Rivera's expression softened slightly. "Predators like your brother are exceptionally good at maintaining a normal facade. They compartmentalize, showing the world exactly what it expects to see while hiding their true nature. The fact that Olivia reacted so strongly to him is actually unusual. Many children this age don't display such clear distress responses." "She was trying to tell us all along," Sarah said quietly. "We just didn't understand what she was saying." "You understood enough to investigate, to set up cameras, to record evidence," the detective reminded her. "You took action when you noticed a pattern, which is more than many parents would have done." As they prepared to leave, Michael asked the question that had been haunting them both. "Will she remember any of this when she's older?" "At 9 months, it's unlikely she'll have conscious memories of these events," Detective Rivera said. "But early experiences can shape emotional responses and attachment patterns. I'd recommend continuing to work with Dr. Chen or another child psychologist to monitor her development." "We will," Sarah promised, "for as long as she needs." Outside the police station, they stood blinking in the afternoon sunlight, the ordinary world continuing around them, despite how fundamentally their lives had changed. Michael took Sarah's hand, squeezing it gently. "I'm sorry I didn't believe you," he said, the words clearly difficult for him. "I should have trusted your instincts from the beginning." "You trusted her in the end," Sarah replied, "when it mattered most." They walked toward his parents' house where Olivia waited, their steps slow but steady. The road ahead would be challenging. Therapy for Olivia and themselves, a criminal trial, explaining to family and friends why Craig would no longer be part of their lives. But for the first time since finding that first recording, Sarah felt they were moving in the right direction. That night, as Olivia slept peacefully in a portable crib beside their bed, Sarah watched her daughter's steady breathing, marveling at the resilience of children. Despite everything she had experienced, Olivia had laughed during her bath that evening, had eaten her dinner with enthusiastic messiness, had curled trustingly against Sarah's chest as she fell asleep. Michael slipped into the room, sitting beside Sarah on the edge of the bed. "She's going to be okay, isn't she?" he asked softly. "Yes," Sarah answered with newfound certainty. "We all are." In the quiet darkness, they made silent promises to their sleeping daughter, to always listen when she tried to tell them something, even if the message came in tears instead of words, to trust their instincts when something felt wrong, to protect her fiercely from anyone who might wish her harm, regardless of family ties or social pressure, and perhaps most importantly, to remember that sometimes the youngest among us see truths that adults have learned to ignore, that a baby's cry might be the most honest warning we ever receive. Olivia stirred in her sleep, one small hand escaping her blanket. Sarah gently tucked it back in, her fingers lingering on her daughter's soft skin. "Sleep well, little one," she whispered. "You're safe now." And for the first time since this ordeal began, Sarah believed those words completely.